Oh, I got to meet Juan at the last ECC conference. James and I made a presentation, and he came up afterwards, and he started telling us his story, and it's like, wow, man, you're a natural production thinker. You got to come to our symposium and tell your cable pulling story. He went from chaos to performance. He said, yeah, I'll do that. So Juan, thank you. He's the operations executive at Clayco with over 17 years of extensive experience on major domestic and international capital projects, oil, gas, power generation, heavy industry, food and beverage, manufacturing, providing operations expertise that spans the full cycle of a project, ensuring efficiency through project execution. So Juan will give you a full half hour.
Okay, thank you.
So it's all yours.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Gary. Good afternoon. Really happy to be here with you guys. As you guys see, chaos to performance. And pretty sure most of you, or all of you, have been part of a project where we find ourselves into chaos, right? And part of my experience and part of what I want to bring to the table today is my field experience. So when I started my career, I started from the trades, from the field. And that led me to be hands-on and to understand the processes on how things get built. I remember, and I want to kind of like walk you guys through my journey in my construction career and how I went from my first day in construction in an $8 billion refinery project as an electrician, and 13 years later, in 2019, all that experience and all those change events through those 13 years allow me to convert chaos to performance. Because at the end of the day, what drives production and productivity is the field, the workforce, like Todd was saying earlier today. We can try to implement processes, systems, but we really need to be able, as leaders, to transform the environment and be able to give to the people in the field the tools and resources to be able to traduce the productivity and production into measurements that can change the projects and how they are executed. So I remember my first day at that project as an electrician. And I walk into the gate, and they told me, you're going to be working with the cable pulling crew. So I show up. I was expecting the first day to be pulling cable, and I asked my foreman, my supervisor, okay, what cables are we going to be pulling today? He said, I don't know. I don't know. And I couldn't believe it, right? So the next day, I was expecting to pull cable again. I show up. The first day, he said, just go do some cleanup and try to hide somewhere. We were not productive, guys. And I went home, and my relatives, they asked me, what did you do today? I was like, I didn't know what to say. You know, I couldn't believe it. Next day, I asked the same question. What cables are we going to pull today? He said, wait a second, I'm going to go to the trailer. He came back with a little piece of paper. He said, can you go and look for this cable in the cable yard? And I went. Took me 2 hours. You guys can imagine, $8 billion project, cables everywhere. It took me forever to find the cable that I was looking for. 2 hours later, I came back with the cable. There were 6 guys waiting for me. So it doesn't take that much or it doesn't take that long when you try to think outside the box and you want to think different and you want to bring innovative ideas. It doesn't take years for you to identify the gaps. It took me 2 to 3 days. And guess what I did? I talked to my supervisor. I said, why we cannot do something different? And he said, shut up. Just go, pull the cable, or do whatever. I mean, that's the reality, because I was at the bottom. And I thought, well, when I'm a foreman, I'm going to be able to make it happen. So few months later, I was doing okay. I was pulling a lot of cables, so they promoted me. I was a foreman. I talked to the superintendent. Hey, can we change the way we do it? I have ideas. Shut up. Go do what you have to do. So the point that I'm trying to make, and this probably long introduction, is how real world works in the field. The reality. You can sit in an office and go through Excel files and graphs and all you want. But the reality of what's happening in the field, that's what drives the production. And that's what drives productivity. And the morale of people when they want to bring innovative ideas and they get shut down, that's happening everywhere. So how to break through those situations and how to keep moving ahead even when the industry is shutting you down. And I think that's the journey that I want you guys to know about me. So now I think I'm going to move to the next slide. So as I was moving up on my career, I identified some of these challenges. And as you guys might know, electrical is always kind of like a separate component of the project. Nobody wants to talk about electrical. They love piping, and because it's the bulk of the man hours, and everybody talks about isometrics. But electrical, just buy the cables, and we'll let the superintendent and electrical manager deal with it. And sometimes they become the bottleneck towards the end of the project. So I identify all those deficiencies, challenges, and I highlighted some of the key aspects. One of the biggest complex aspects of the electrical is really hard to plan electrical pulling cable through areas, because you can't break a cable. It's not like a piece of pipe that you can assign to a certain area. So that's one of the challenges, and that's why it's really hard to find work packages and processes that allow people to plan the work. Cable management, always a challenge. You run out of cable, then it's 6-week lead time. So you go to the cable yard, then you don't find the cable, then you have to go tell them that you're going to have a delay of X amount of weeks because you don't have the cable. So as I was going through all these processes through, again, 13 years, moving up, and I couldn't make a change. When I was a project manager, I tried to do it, couldn't do it. And every step and every year, I was told that I was crazy. I was crazy. Because what I wanted to do, I wanted to change the way we were operating and the standard process to pull cable. But I didn't give up. So I know it's kind of like a abstract concept, so I made a video myself, like a cartoon, that I would like to show you guys to see what a day for an electrician is. So let me go to the next slide, and hopefully we can play the video. Okay, got it. It was on me. So this is the electrician, 6:30 a.m., asking what cables he's going to pull today, and his boss told him, that's pretty much me asking. And he just leaves this up to the supervisor. 8:30 a.m., he's like, I need to find these 7 cables to pull today, while the other guys are waiting. He goes to the cable yard. That's me trying to find those 7 cables in a place full of cables, so it's challenging. 2 hours later, he just finds 4 cables out of the 7. The reality is the other guy has the other 3 cables in another part of the plant. And he said, I'll be done later, so you can pick it up later. So at 10:30, he actually goes back to his crew and said, well, let's pull the 4 cables. We don't have the 7, so let's get going. That's when they actually start to be productive. So at 2 p.m., the other guy said, hey, I'm done with the cables that you needed. He said, it's too late. I don't have the forklift. We'll do it tomorrow. There is no rush. At 4:30, goes back to his boss. His boss asking how many cables he pulled today. He said, I pulled 4 out of the 7, and we'll pull the rest tomorrow. He said, sounds good, good job. Non-productive time, 4 hours, from 6:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Productive time, 6 hours. So you earn, and maybe, depending on the productivity factor, but you actually work 6 hours, productive work. The other 4 hours, you were trying to find the cable, you were trying to define what you were going to pull, and then the other guys were just hiding somewhere. That's the reality. And that keeps happening, guys. It is happening. It keeps happening. So when I noticed all this, I started to think about how can we improve this process. I mean, I remember there was one day I was in a duct bank pulling one cable through one conduit, and then 2 months later I was in the same duct bank pulling another cable through the same conduit, and then 3 months later I was in the same duct bank pulling a cable through the same conduit, and I was thinking, why we're doing it this way, where I can pull the 3 cables or 4 cables or 5 cables at the same time and improve my productivity because there was no planning. And I started to think about paralleling cable reels and how to maximize the productivity through this approach. And there's some valuable information there, but basically throughout those 13 years, I was just thinking on this, thinking, how can we do it? And you see the cable reel and several cables and a guy pulling it. So, and I'm going to play this other video where you can actually take this approach and take it even further to the suppliers, where you can maximize and plan your pulls, and then you can send it to the manufacturer on how you're gonna pull these cables, and they will re-spool it and they will send it to you already complete. So you just have to pull it. We'll show it later. Okay, so we'll go next. So now, 13 years later, I'm in North Carolina. I'm actually in Pennsylvania, and I was building a power plant in Pennsylvania, and there was this other project that was about to start in North Carolina, power plant, 2019. And I got a phone call from one of the lead executives of that company at that time, and they had a big problem. As you guys can see on the left side, the project was bidded with 1.2 million feet of cable. So that was their estimate linear feet of cable that they had at the beginning for that project, with 122,000 man hours. When they finally finished the design, they realized that they needed 3.1 million feet of cable to build that power plant. It was a 2x2 combined cycle. So guess what? One of those top leaders on that company, I think he recalled that one day he heard a crazy guy talking about he could do something different with cable pulling. So I got a phone call. They say, can you come down here right away and help us out? We have a big problem. And I went out there, and 13 years later, I had the opportunity to make it happen. And they gave me all the resources. We had to go back to engineering, reroute the cables, and we were able to implement a production system and an operations process that will allow the guys in the field to better understand what they needed to do. And as you guys can see, the outcome on the right side at completion, we pulled the 3.1 million feet of cable, and we spent 132,000 man hours, which was a big milestone. And just to give you guys some context, in the power market, power industry, at that time, 2019, the average progress or weekly progress for cable pulling was about 50,000 feet of cable a week, with 50 crews or 50 people, 50 electricians pulling cable. And at peak, I was able to pull 170,000 feet of cable with the same amount of people, just implementing these tools. So as you can see, I kind of like this slide because that kind of reminds me when I got to the project, I sat down with the executive leaders, and we technically in their mind it was just two options. Option A, we finished late, 60 weeks late, because we kept the same production, the same installation unit rates. We were going to finish 60 weeks late, based on the schedule that was part of the contract, and that will represent around like $18 million on LDs. Or option B, we bring more manpower, and that will be like 190,000 man hours. That is roughly another $20 million. So, but the crazy guy came up with option C, and the option C is, let me implement something different. Let me try to forget about being an executive or project manager or whatever. Let me be an electrician, and let me play with it. Let me apply my experience, hands-on experience, to change how we do it. And we did it. So it took, I would say the biggest challenge is being able to transform the idea and the concept and translate that to the guys in the field so they can execute it. But if the message comes from someone that has done it, it's easier to break through because you speak the same language. And you can go out there and translate what you want to do and basically saying in the way that they can understand it, and that's how we did it. This is just an example of how we built these pool packages and how we were respooling the cables, and it was really good to see that the foreman in the morning, instead of coming to site to trying to find the cables and kind of guess what he was going to pull the next day, he was given this pull package in a weekly basis, so he knew what he was going to pull. And I had about like 2 crews on nights where they were just respooling cables, the picture that I showed you guys earlier where you have multiple cables in one reel. So the day that the foreman was getting ready to pull the cable, he will show up next to the manhole. The reel was already there, so he doesn't need to go and look for a forklift to transport the reel from the reel jar to the manhole. It was already there, cables were ready. Only thing he needed to worry about was pulling. So that's how we maximize our productivity, because there were specific tasks assigned to each one of the crew, and they knew what step they needed to complete and how it was going to be completed. So it was like an assembly line process. So when I refer to the assembly line process, I wanted to represent this in a way that this is how the idea developed in my mind throughout those 13 years, because we needed to start from the design and how we route the cable. So I identify that engineers, they route the cable based on service level and how they were developing the design based on the PNIDs and systems, et cetera, but not necessarily with a constructability input. So that's the first step. We have to engage with engineering and design and being able to reroute cables to make it easier for the guys in the field. Then through our procurement, engaging suppliers and being able to implement those cable pull packages and cable pull planning with the suppliers so they understand what we're trying to do and support the effort. And then cable management. So one of the biggest advantages also from this approach is we didn't run out of cable. We have some challenges, obviously, but we were able to get ahead of those challenges, and we never came across of an issue where we ran out of cable and we were waiting 5 weeks to get cable, because each cable is already assigned, is already identified, and you can't just use it for wherever, because each cable reel has a tag and is already assigned to a certain pool. And obviously, in the logistics side, it helps tremendously, because then you reduce the cost for rental equipment, so you don't need that many You don't need that many forklifts. You don't need that many trucks, and you don't need that many people running around trying to find the cables, and then the wait time. So in logistics, we were able to improve tremendously too. And the last step is just pulling the cable, which I already explained that the foreman just needed to worry about pulling cable, and it created a really good competition between the groups that were pulling cable, because each group they knew that this week my package is 20,000 feet of cable, and the other one has a 19,000 feet of cable, and they were trying to accomplish that, and they were being measured by those metrics. So basically, we transformed the subjectivity of the planning to have an objective planning through our process that allows them to know what they were going to do, and not let the planning to the guys in the field with lack of information and lack of resources to do it. So in this specific project, we were able to improve the productivity by 134%. We reduced the rental equipment cost by 35%. On those costs allocated to the electrical division. We have cable procurement savings of 18%, and the on-site man hours for electrical were reduced by 42%. So after the project was nearly complete, the same guys that called me crazy for a few years, by that time I was working for a big EPC company worldwide, had people flying from all over the world to meet me and talk about this. And I think, like the biggest message for me is you no matter how impossible it looks like, no matter how difficult it seems like, and if people doesn't listen or you don't feel like you're being part of something bigger, don't give up. And throughout this process, I was able to not just improve on electrical, but I have been able to implement the same tools and the same approach on other type of systems and disciplines and projects, going through different variety of projects and advantages to owners. So like Gary was saying, when I was at the ECC conference, I heard about the operational science and the concepts and how things are being done. I immediately, that made a click to me. It was like instantaneously click, and I knew that basically what I was doing at that time I was analyzing the production process and how to optimize it and how to engage the teams to be able to get it across the line. So that's pretty much the experience and the journey, and yeah. So.
All right, we have time for a few questions. I told one when he told me his story, he said, "You found your tribe, man. You've got your tribe, so you need to work together." You might even have some ideas on how to improve on what you came up with there. But it's another conversation.
Yeah.
Any questions for Juan before we?
That's the video. So.
Oh, we got the video.
Thank you, Jim. So in that video, instead of moving 5 reels, instead of pulling five cables at different times, you're pulling the 5 cables at the same time, and you're just moving 1 reel at once.
That's a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
Great to see. Any questions for Juan?
And more than a question is your reflection around, many project manager or director don't really know how the work really happen, what really happen in the field. We do big plans, as you say, Excel spreadsheet, and then you say, how many feet of cable have you pulled today? How many feet of cable are you going to pull tomorrow? So what is your reflection about how really close the gap between, the big guys and the guys in the room and what's really happening in the field? What is, people like you are really special. You have field experience and a manager. How do you, what do you think should really happen?
It's a very good question and complicated question. I think the biggest challenge that we have in our industry, and I think is unfortunately just getting worse, is that now some of the leadership and some of even the trades and some of the, if we talk about supervision, superintendents, project managers, directors, you name it, there is a gap right now, and I see that gap is getting worse because we're not having the same group of people coming through the trades. So execution is the key, and field experience is very, very important. So we as an industry, we need to find ways to incentivize the market, incentivize young people, and incentivize the trades so we can attract people and they can go through that ladder instead of just going directly to an executive position and demand things and I ask for productivity and production and ask for so many things where they don't really understand how it works, because that's the key. You have to be on the trench. So I think that's the answer. The answer is we as leaders and as companies that are leading this effort, we have to find ways to be able to create programs where we can get people through the trades and then they become leaders and they can do these type of things. I think that's the key.
Any other question?
So in your example, actually, you said you had 4 unproductive hours and 6 productive hours, but they stopped working at 2. So it seemed like there was only like 3.5 productive hours, unless I missed something.
No, so the 2 p.m., and I'm sorry, like I said, I did that video, so it's probably a little bit confusing, but the 2 p.m. is, what happened in reality is the guy went and he was looking for 7 cables. He couldn't find the 7 cables, he just found 4, because another guy earlier that day or the day before, he grabbed the other 3 cables, and that happens all the time. So he might be working on the water treatment building with the 3 cables, so that guy told this other guy, I'm done at 2 p.m., you can come and pick up the 3 cables that you were looking for. But the guy is like, it's too late, I'm gonna do it tomorrow, because it's the availability.
From like 11 or 10.
Yeah, 10:30 to
10:30 to
4. They work from 10:30 to 4:30. And the other guy, they just were able to
do the work.
They was just able to pull 4 out of the 7 because the other guy had the cables.
Yeah. So that's a side note, but it is what it is. So on that project that you mentioned that was 120,000 man hours, you had the A, B, C options. You mentioned like there was the C option, which obviously was the parallel cabling pulling that you innovation. So if they didn't have that option, what were they going to do? Were they going to actually lose money?
Actually, that company went bankrupt.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Actually,
that's probably the option.
I'm not going to say the name of the company, but the company went bankrupt 2 years later because when it was a huge company. So when you deal with big LNG projects, $5 billion, $8 billion projects, and in this particular case, the hiccup was the electrical side of things. So, but if you're not able, in large companies and large projects, you're not able to scale this idea so quick to be able to get caught up with big projects. So what happened is that the trend of getting projects, because I bid the project, I want to get the project, so I lower my bid, and then you lower your unit rates, installation unit rates to be able to match your budget, and then you leave it up to the guys in the field. So yes, we'll be losing a ton of money, but we didn't lose money on that project. But definitely that trend of how to buy out those projects led the company to get in bankruptcy. Yeah.
And that's not a unique thing,
No.
unfortunately. Well, thank you again.
No.
Very
Thank you.
much for sharing your
Thank you.